I don't normally post videos in the middle of the week like this, but this was an idea I had almost incorporated into the last part of my series about Goku never hitting his head. Anyway, for Tao to be turned into an android, there's just some small changes and assumptions we have to make. We have no idea if Mercenary Tao ever even met Dr. Gero, but since he wasn't turned into an android, I'm assuming he hasn't. From what we know about him being turned into a cyborg, he had to pay someone to turn him into one. Personally, I don't think they would have to pay Dr. Gero. I think Gero would have been eager to have a willing test subject for his android project like that. After all, from what we know about the androids, all of the androids before Android 17 were completely mechanical, so if Tao somehow knew about this plan to turn people into an android, he could have volunteered. That brings us to what the changes in this timeline needs to be in order for this to happen. From the way the manga shows Mercenary Tao's meeting with Commander Red, he had never seen Tao's abilities before he had him fight and kill General Blue. So I think the change would need to be that Tao has taken contracts for targets from the Red Ribbon Army before this. If he was around the Red Ribbon Army more often, he could have heard about Dr. Gero and potentially about his android project as well. Another change would have to be that Dr. Gero is ready to turn a human into an android earlier than usual, since he usually waited until Android 17 and 18 to do that for the first time. So, after Tao was inevitably defeated by Goku, and after he took enough time to recover, he would have to decide what to do now. Normally he found someone to turn him into a cyborg, but we have no idea who that was. The weakened Tao might have a different idea in this timeline. If he would remember Dr. Gero and his android project, I don't think it would be too hard for him to find Gero at first. So this would be shortly before the time he went into hiding. The secret lab likely wasn't constructed yet. Also, as I mentioned earlier, he likely doesn't have to pay Gero for this, as he'd just be thrilled to have a willing test subject. When he meets with Gero, he would just get straight to the point and ask about Gero turning him into an android. He'd be upfront about not having done this yet, but if he's willing to take the risks, he'd do it. I don't see him not taking the risks, especially after it's mentioned that this could make him exponentially stronger. So Gero would then begin the process of turning him into an android, no matter how long it might take. Years pass, and the next time anyone sees Mercenary Tao, still at the 23rd World Martial Arts Tournament. When the 23rd World Martial Arts Tournament eventually comes around, it starts as per usual, with Master Roshi and Launch being the first ones to arrive. Bulma arrives next, with Flora Oolong coming along with her. Goku is still the next one to arrive. They don't recognize him at first. Finally, Yamcha, Tien, Krillin, and Shotsu arrive as well. After catching up for a bit, the preliminaries were about to begin. Though Tien still secretly asks Roshi if he was going to enter, but he denies this since he can't keep up with them anymore. Then as they all gather to draw lots for the preliminaries, they see Piccolo Jr. there and talk about him. A mysterious girl, which we know to be Chi-Chi, still comes up to talk to Goku, but he doesn't recognize her. Regardless, when they go to draw lots, Tien and Shotsu scatter their numbers so that they have a chance to go against each other in the main tournament. Before getting into the fights in the preliminaries, something to briefly talk about is how strong Mercenary Tao would be as an android. From what we know about Androids 17 and 18, they were just ordinary teenagers, but once turned into androids, they far surpassed Frieza in terms of power, since Mercenary Tao is far stronger than the average teenager, and assuming he got the same boost in power as they did from being turned into an android, he'd greatly surpass Androids 17 and 18 in power. One last thing before getting into the tournament, I figured I'd give Mercenary Tao a number designation as an android. The last canon android we see is Android 8, but in one of the games and spin-off mangas, we see Android 9. They look different in both versions, so I decided to make Mercenary Tao known as Android 10. Now, we can finally get into the fights in the preliminaries. As usual, Goku ends up fighting King Chappa first, but he still knocks him out in one hit. Tien, Krillin, and Yamcha all easily make it through their first fight as well. But when it comes to Shotsu, he is put up against someone called Android 10, so he wouldn't recognize who his opponent was until they were both in the ring. Their fight likely goes the same as it usually did, with Tao knocking him out of the ring and purposely leaving him just barely alive, so that he isn't disqualified from the tournament. How much stronger Tao is, Shotsu will likely be in critical enough condition that he had to receive medical attention. Regardless, Tao being alive would still catch Tien off guard, so he'd explain that it just took a while for him to bounce back from his injuries, though he did have some help. As usual, he still tells Goku to get past the preliminaries, since he wanted to face him in the main tournament, not to win, of course, but because he wanted to take his life. Though he also told Tien to prepare for death as well. Anyway, heroes still make it through the preliminaries with relative ease. When the lots are drawn for the tournament, the fights were the same as they were in the manga. Before getting into the first fight, I briefly want to describe what Mercenary Tao is like as an android. I imagine that he would be like a prototype to what we see Android 19 and 20 being, so he would have the things in his hands that let him absorb energy. though, like he did as a cyborg, I think he could have hidden weapons under his arms. After all, we saw that Android 16 was able to remove part of his arms, so I think Gero could have designed Tao to do the same. So, under one hand, he'd still have a blade, and under the other, he'd still have an energy cannon. Now, after Tien and Tao enter the ring, their fight would be nothing like it normally went. No matter what Tien tries at first, whether it be a fast flurry of attacks or his multiform technique, Tao would be dodging or blocking everything effortlessly. He'd soon counter Tien with a single strike and send him skidding across the ring. This would stun Tien, as not only is Tao faster and stronger, but his ki is literally unreadable. He'd then try a Dodon Ray against Tao, but he would absorb it with his hand, thus shocking Tien even more. Tao would mock Tien for going soft, but shortly afterwards, Tien would go all out. He tries using his Tri-Beam against Tao, which damages the arena floor greatly. And once the smoke clears, Tao would be revealed to be standing in the arena unharmed, minus some tears on his clothing. With this having used most of Tien's energy, he begins to fall to the ground. Tao grabs him mid-air, as he then uses precision strikes to disable his limbs. This knocks Tien unconscious, as Tao chose to let him live, for now. While he did want to kill Tien, he wanted to kill Goku more, so he chose to spare him. Since Tien is in critical condition, the heroes would likely have either Puar or Oolong take him to the hospital. Of course, how Tao treated Tien will horrify Goku, Krillin, and Yamcha. Even Shen becomes deeply concerned, as he begins to suspect that Tao may be a greater threat than Piccolo Jr. Regardless, even though the heroes are angered, the next match between Goku and the anonymous girl was about to begin, so they couldn't focus on it for long. There isn't a reason to go into the detail for the next 3 fights, as they go the same as they usually do. So, the fights in the second round would be as follows. The first match is between Android 10 and Goku, and the second match is between Ma Jr. and Shen. When Tao and Goku enter the ring, even Goku would notice that there's something off about him, and that he isn't like the Tao he fought as a child. Before they begin to fight, Goku would likely recognize the Red Ribbon Army insignia on his clothing. So, this is likely where Tao explains how he was turned into an android by a scientist of the former Red Ribbon Army. Goku would start this fight off cautiously, trying to use feints and attacks that are low risk. Tao wouldn't even flinch, he'd just be countering him effortlessly and analyzing his fighting style in the process. Also, Tao likely mocked him throughout their fight. He'd mockingly ask him something like what happened to that level of strength that he'd shown him all those years ago. No matter what Goku tries, whether it be quick strikes or ki blasts, it doesn't faze Tao. Eventually, Tao would remove his right hand and use his energy cannon to fire blasts back at Goku. But he eventually replaces it as he then grabs Goku mid-air and slams him into the wall of the arena, cracking it. Tao was finally beginning to use lethal force, but he doesn't even try to hide it. Since Goku realizes the danger, he goes all out by using his full power. He'd try assaults at his full speed, and he'd even try using the After Image technique to try and confuse Tao, but none of it works. Goku tries using a Kamehameha, but it is effortlessly absorbed by the mechanical mercenary. A desperate Goku might even try the Super Kamehameha, but while he is charging it, Tao uses his superior speed to appear in front of him before Goku can react. He punches Goku in the stomach, causing him to keel over and cough up blood. Tao then lifts him by the neck, and after revealing the hidden blade under his left hand, he impales Goku through the chest with it. After his body goes limp, Tao lets it fall to the destroyed floor of the arena. At first, the crowd falls silent, as they would be horrified by what they just witnessed. The silence is soon broken by a scream, as Chi-Chi forces her way through the crowd to get to Goku's body. They were engaged not long ago, and now her fiancé is dead. Either she waited so long for him to fulfill his promise, that hope was built up when he agreed to marry her, and then torn away from her shortly afterwards. As for the others, Krillin would be paralyzed with rage and shock at first, and when he nearly runs into the ring, he would be stopped by Yamcha so that he doesn't get himself killed. Yamcha would be angry too, of course, but he just clenches his fists, as he's also furious at his own powerlessness. Master Roshi is stunned, as he never expected to see a tragedy like this, and he might regret not fighting in the tournament himself, even though he likely knows he couldn't have prevented this. About the only heroes that likely don't know what is going on are Tien and Shatsu, since they are at the hospital. Kame would be horrified as well, because his champion is now dead, and since there's an even worse threat than Piccolo Jr. As for Piccolo Jr., he'd be furious, as he was supposed to kill Goku, not this bucket of bolts. Since Tao stole his chance of revenge from him, he would likely want to fight Tao instead. Then as for the crowd, once they fully realize what happened, they'd likely erupt into panic and try to flee. The tournament announcer would drop his mic as well as he tries to run. Security might try to step into the ring, but they would be powerless against Tao. The tournament is essentially ended there, as all the staff and spectators tried to flee. Out of desperation, Chi-Chi would eventually try attacking Tao. He'd fight with everything she has, but Tao would let her hit him at first. So after she realizes she's completely powerless, Tao would impale her through the chest with his arm like Android 20 did to Yamcha, mercilessly killing her. After she is killed, Krillin and Yamcha leap into the ring at the same time, as they begin to fight in tandem. Even when coordinating their attacks and blasts, they wouldn't be able to do anything to Tao. Yamcha likely tries to use the Spirit Ball against Tao, and this would be where Krillin uses his Destructo Disc for the first time, but both of these attacks are to no avail. Tao eventually breaks one of Krillin's arms while he was in the middle of trying to punch him. After Krillin falls to the ground and Yamcha tries attacking Tao, he uses a Super Dodon Ray to disintegrate the former bandit. With Krillin on the ground, Tao then crushes his head beneath his foot, killing him as well. Yajirobe is likely still around, since normally he ended up giving Goku a Senzu Bean after he defeated Piccolo Jr. This time, while he is hiding in the stands, he would notice that Tao's back was turned, so he tries using his sword to slice him across the back like he did to Vegeta in the Saiyan saga. While this wouldn't really weaken him, being able to actually slice his skin open would anger Tao, but he would quickly disarm Yajirobe of his sword and use it to kill him, impaling him through the gut with it. Master Roshi, even though he wasn't in the tournament, would be the last of the main heroes to step up to take on Tao. Like we've seen him use in the Tournament of Power, he uses his full power and begins to charge the greatest Kamehameha. Tao takes it head on, and once the smoke clears, he is still standing unscathed, minus his clothes being damaged even more. Roshi then collapses to the ground, dead, as he uses life force in charging that Kamehameha. Even Piccolo Jr. might step up to try and fight Tao next. Since Tao stole his kill, he wanted to kill him for that. Kami, who is watching this, stops controlling Shen. Shen would see the bodies lying around and quickly scurry away like the rest of the spectators did. Kami might briefly swallow his pride at the thought of working with his evil counterpart asked to fight alongside him, as he realizes that Tao is the greater threat right now. But since Piccolo Jr. is still arrogant at this time and didn't start to be redeemed yet, he'd likely shoot this idea down. Anyway, even with his combined brutality and speed, he wouldn't stand a chance against the mercenary. He'd likely try things like the hyper-explosive demon wave, but all this serves to do is completely destroy the arena, leaving a crater behind. Piccolo Jr. tries using his giant form as well, but that just makes him an easier target for the merciless mercenary. Though when Tao is distracted fighting Piccolo Jr., Kami tries to use the evil containment wave. However, I think he'd fail to seal him away like he failed to seal Piccolo Jr. away. After regaining his bearings, Tao blasts Kami with a Super Dodon Ray out of frustration for interrupting their fight, which disintegrates him. With Kami dead, Piccolo Jr. obviously dies as well. Of course, Kami's death also makes the Dragon Balls inert, so there's no way for Bulma to try and revive the heroes. Anyway, now that no one else stands in Tao's way, it's hard to tell what he could do. One of his first stops is likely at the nearby hospital, so that he could finally finish off Tien and Shatsu once and for all. War and Oolong might try to get in his way, but they would be effortlessly stopped as he takes them out. He then kills his former students like he had planned to do for them being traitors in his eyes. As for what he does now, I'm basing what he does off of how in the Dragon Ball Mystical Adventure movie, his goal alongside Master Shen's was to take over the Empire Shatsu ruled. This time, with Tao's newfound level of strength, however, their goal might be to take over the world. Before they do that, though, I could see Shen wanting to become an android as well. I think this would mainly be out of some sort of jealousy of his brother, so he'd ask Dr. Gero to turn him into an android as well. I don't see a reason why he wouldn't, so Master Shen would be turned into Android 11. After the conversion to an android, he'd be just as strong as his brother. Anyway, after his conversion to an android is complete, I think they'd betray Dr. Gero. He'd likely try to order them around like he did with androids 17 and 18, which would clash with their arrogant attitudes. I could also see them wanting to betray him if they found out that he planned to keep making androids, so they wouldn't allow someone stronger than them to be created. When they finally rebel against Dr. Gero, before he can use the remote control to detonate them, he'd be killed by the two brothers. They'd then set their minds to controlling the world how they see fit. I briefly want to talk about what Tao was doing while Shen was being turned into an android. Throughout this time, Tao likely continued his mercenary work at first. The world would have been terrified of him, since the news about the massacre at the World Martial Arts Tournament spread quickly. He'd likely become even more of an elite assassin at first, as various nations or criminal empires might hire him to take out their enemies, which he would be able to do with ease. Though by working with these nations, he would also be making inroads that will allow him to take them down easier later on. When Shen's conversion to an android is complete, he might join in on this mercenary work, but I could also see him keeping his martial arts school open for people they see fit to train. Regardless, they'd eventually begin to take over the world by starting to dismantle its power structure silently. This would start with assassinating military officers and world leaders, such as King Furry. They could also do things like sabotage communication networks and leak data that cause global mistrust and panic. Basically, they secretly destabilize the world, and then offer protection at the cost of obedience. Eventually, I could see the regime being called something like the Red Phoenix. This name pays homage to the Red Ribbon Army, it fits with the bird-based name of the Crane School, and it also symbolizes how their regime is being reborn from the ashes of the previous regime, just like a phoenix is reborn from its own ashes. Tao will likely be more of the muscle behind things, while Shen is more of the voice of their organization. Everything would eventually be forced to run how they want it to be, even down to the schools which were forced to teach the Crane doctrine. To spread fear and to promote obedience, I could even see Tao starting to publicly execute any opposition while also broadcasting these executions. With the blueprints and information from Dr. Gero in their hands, I could see them trying to force other martial artists they deemed worthy to be enhanced cybernetically, as long as they're made to be weaker than themselves, of course, which they're likely to be made weaker anyway, since they killed Dr. Gero, and I doubt any other scientist would be able to cybernetically enhance people as well as Dr. Gero was able to. In the aftermath of the heroes dying, the only main allies of the Z fighters that survived are Bulma and Launch. Capsule Corporation likely becomes a symbol of the resistance to their regime eventually, so I don't see Bulma just taking this without trying anything to stop them. Of course, Bulma would get help from her father, Dr. Brief, in leading this resistance as well. Capsule Corporation likely goes underground, as they use their technology to build things that could be useful for this resistance. This could range from things like signal chambers up to things like power suits or mechs for fighters in the resistance. Bulma would likely be driven by both guilt and a desire for revenge, and she'd wonder what she could have done to try and save the heroes. Regardless, resistance cells would be scattered, as they'd rely on supply drops from Capsule Corporation. This way, it'd be harder for the resistance to be taken out all at once. As for Launch, since Bulma and Capsule Corporation are mostly working underground, she might become more of a literal face for the resistance. She'd be a field agent, as she'd do things like scout out, smuggle from, and sabotage the Red Phoenix's regime. Her skills with firearms and explosives would also be useful, and she could probably quickly forge ties with black markets to make deals with them. Though with her having two different forms, she also could become skilled in disguise and intimidation, if she learns how to control these forms at will. Maybe Capsule Corporation would be able to come up with some type of technology to help her control her forms, but it's hard to say. When in their blonde form, she'd be doing things like blowing up factories where the regime's tech and supplies are created, but she'd also be stealing tech from them, and smuggling things like food, medicine, or weapons between outposts created by Capsule Corporation. As for her blue form, she'd likely be helping maintain their cover, gather intel, and infiltrate high surveillance areas. Though when in the outposts, since she is generally kind in this form, she'd likely be helping by cooking food for the members of the resistance and by providing medical aid for them. Launch and Bulma's ideas for doing things will likely clash at first, especially when she's in her blonde form, as they're both headstrong. Over time, however, the dynamic of them would grow into Bulma planning the operation while Launch typically executes it. If the Capsule Corporation resistance ever succeeds against the Red Phoenix regime is hard to say, so I'll leave it up to your interpretation, at least for now. I might come back to this story if I can think up anything that would make an interesting story in this dystopian world. Also, I know that I got a little far-fetched with some of the ideas towards the end of this video. I was just trying to make it a more interesting story.